This is the Impressions Xchange podcast.
Impressions Xchange podcast,
where all topics impacting the graphic imaging and printing industry are addressed via in-depth news coverage, analysis, and timely interviews.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley Roberts, the host of the Impressions Xchange podcast series. I'm very excited to bring you this episode because we will focus on the upcoming Wide Format Summit. In the first part of the episode, I will be joined by the publisher of Wide Format Impressions, Steve Duccilli, as well as Denise Gustavson, who is the editor-in-chief of Wide Format Impressions. Later in the episode, senior editor Dan Marx will be joined by Marco Boer, VP of IT Strategies, and Tim Greene, research director with IDC's Hard Copy Solutions Group, to talk about the wide format segment. So let's get to it. Steve, thank you so much for joining us today. And Denise, welcome back.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks for having us, Ashley.
Of course. So I wanted to bring you both on because you are both intimately involved at the Wide Format Summit, which is taking place July 25th to the 27th in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida. So Steve, this is the second live Wide Format Summit. So can you tell us a little bit about the event and how it came to be?
Sure. Yes. As you mentioned, last July in Austin, we launched the very first Wide Format Summit. And it was the first time that a hosted attendee event had been held in the history of wide format printing. Now, NAPCO has quite a lot of experience in producing these hosted events in other segments of print, in commercial printing and in packaging, going back 10 years, but it had not been done in wide format printing before. And really, our summits are totally unlike other type of event experiences that printers are accustomed to. It's not a trade show, it's not a traditional conference, but it's very much an educational and networking experience that's really unlike anything else that's available in the printing industry. Our agenda combines in-depth education featuring many of the thought leaders in wide format printing in educational sessions that we program, as well as interactive case studies featuring successful implementations of new technologies, business plans and initiatives to break into new segments of print, other success stories from the field that highlight how print service providers are succeeding with wide format printing. And then finally, in-depth meetings, one-to-one discussions taking place between the print executives who attend and the leading technology providers and thought leaders. And these are in-depth 20-minute discussions that are very difficult to have in the context of, say, a trade show where there's so many other distractions and other things that are happening. But these are in-depth, deep dive conversations where attendees get to explore what the different solution providers have that might be of interest to them, and also to explain their unique circumstances and needs in a way that really can't be done in other types of engagement environments. So it's a busy 2.5 days, but it's a truly unique experience for our attendees. And a lot of people often ask me, well, what does hosted mean? Hosted means that for qualified attendees, printers who are invited to attend after going through our qualification process, all expenses are paid. Everything from your airfare to your accommodations at the PGA National Resort this year, to airport transfers, meals, entertainment. It's an all-inclusive experience for those who attend.
Great. That sounds fantastic. I mean, the case studies, the networking alone sounds just incredibly invaluable. And I know there's some educational sessions there. So Denise, can you kind of talk us through some of the other things that attendees can expect from this year's event?
Sure. I mean, Steve touched on a lot of it, but I'll touch on a couple of some of the educational stuff, which I think is going to be really, really insightful and important to the attendees. Now, I mean, we all know there's been things that have been going on for the last 2 years. We've dealt with the pandemic, we've dealt with supply chain issues, problems getting substrates, even problems getting some equipment in some cases. And some of our sessions are going to touch directly on how all of these crises or how all of these challenges have impacted the market and really what print providers can expect moving forward. So, I mean, that's going to be our kickoff keynote for the first day of the event. So, that's really going to get us going. And then we have different panels throughout the sessions, throughout the days, the 2.5 days. Another session that I think is going to be really interesting is, if you could go back, knowing what you know now, if you could go back to, March of 2020, how would you do things differently? That's a really tough question for a lot of people to answer. Mm-hmm. Because things have changed so much. So we're actually going to get a panel of folks together to talk about how things have changed. What are the different KPIs that printers need to, talk about, to look at, and how companies have really changed in order for them to grow as they're moving forward.
That sounds fascinating. I am very much so looking forward to the coverage and hearing about that session specifically, and also everything else that's going on during the event. So it sounds really exciting. And so Steve and Denise, I'd like to ask you both this question. What are you most excited for? Steve, do you want to start?
Well, sure. I think that what I'm most excited about is the opportunity to gather the community again, and all representatives from the community. And it really is, to Denise's point earlier, a very interesting time in this segment of print, because we have these massive growth opportunities that are in front of us as the vertical segments of wide format reemerge, and everything is changing and presenting new opportunities. But at the same time, as Denise said, we have significant challenges in supply lines, in managing our workforce, in dealing with the convergence of all the other segments that are coming into wide format, because it's such a versatile technology. So that's a long answer to your question, but what I'm looking forward to is the chance to discuss all of these issues with all the stakeholders in the community again.
Great. That's wonderful. Thanks. And Denise, what are you most excited for?
I mean, I'm going to echo some of what Steve said, being able to get together face to face to talk about the issues that everyone is facing is really valuable. And, I only highlighted 2 of the sessions that we're going to be talking about, but I mean, we're going to be talking about, HR issues. We're going to be talking about economic issues, about new markets, moving into textiles, automation, all of these things that we really need to start addressing. Also, we're going to look at who's buying wide format. What are the print buyers doing? So I think it's really the breadth of the topics that we're going to be talking about. I mean, and that's not even talking about what we're going to be bringing up in all of the boardrooms and all the case studies. So it really is, kind of like a meeting of the minds that we really haven't had a chance to have. And it's going to be so valuable to everybody. So I think that's kind of what I'm excited about, is getting everybody together to really, to pick everybody's brain and really see what's going on, and what's happening, and how we can all benefit and prosper as we're moving through the end of this year into next year.
Yeah. I mean, from what you've both described, I mean, this event just sounds like it's going to be like none other, and just incredibly informative, educational. The networking sounds like it's, second to none. So I'm very excited to see what comes of it. And I'm sure you are as well. And I'm sure attendees will come away feeling just invigorated and feeling like it's been such a valuable event. So thank you both so much for joining me on today's episode. I really appreciate it.
It's our pleasure.
Thanks for having us again, Ashley.
Of course. And stay tuned. You don't want to miss Dan's discussion with Marco and Tim coming up next. Dan, take it away.
Thanks, Ashley. The wide format segment is not new, and it's no longer the non-saturated, easy money segment it was a decade or more back. That said, the diversity of technologies and inks for wide format inkjet, coupled with the many materials that can be used, has resulted in a large playing field. Today, to help us understand where the wide format segment is and where it's going, we have Marco Boer, Vice President of IT Strategies, and Tim Greene, Research Director with IDC's Hard Copy Solutions Group. Both are featured presenters at this year's Wide Format Summit. Welcome.
Hey, Dan.
Hey, Marco, let's start with you. I know you've been following developments in digital printing, including wide format, for quite some time. How would you describe the maturity of the wide format segment, and in what ways has its development surprised you?
So it's actually the segment that launched our business back in 1992. And so we've been tracking it for a long time. I would say that, first of all, this segment is relatively mature in the sense that when it started back in the day, people said, oh, it's never going to replace screen or for that matter, offset. It's too slow or the quality wasn't good enough. And fast forward, both of these issues have been addressed. But even today, our feeling is that inkjet is a parallel market to screen and offset because of the differences in productivity and cost. So people are willing to pay for the convenience and flexibility that digital printing provides in wide format, but yet they still have these super long run lengths. Oh, by the way, those run lengths, of course, are dramatically coming down during the supply chain instabilities because people can't really project what they're going to have and when they're going to have it. So their orders are getting smaller, and that's actually in a very interesting way, causing a resurgence in growth in wide format that wouldn't have happened otherwise.
Very interesting. Tim, in terms of technology, where have you seen the most development in recent years, and how has it served to expand the possibilities of wide format or grow the space it holds?
Yeah, great question. So there's been, of course, every area continues to kind of evolve, some, more slowly or more quickly than others. If I had to identify one, I'd say the area of print heads for sure has been really exciting. I think the people who make industrial print heads are making them, with more nozzles. They're able to fire faster. They're wider. All of that has more reliably and all that. So all of that has the compounding effect of like, okay, not only is it faster with higher quality and wider, it enables much greater levels of speed, and it enables really whole new areas. I think we're going to get into some of those, but I would say the area of printheads has been, in terms of like stacking them up, I would say that's been the area we've seen the most development. It's pretty exciting.
Okay, and I know for a long time there was this promise that the cost of print heads was coming down, and there would be this point where we'd have this explosion of arrays of print heads. Are we there yet? Are the prices down, or are they still up, but people are still going there?
Well, of course, like everything, there's a range, right? You can have more or less disposable print heads, and then there's those that cost thousands and thousands of dollars. But I think what I would argue is that the utility of all of those is getting much, much better, right? So you're getting more nozzles, you're getting wider, more reliability, better performance at a lower price. Now, I don't really think there's any, from a manufacturer standpoint, any reason to really want to drive the cost of print heads down. Meaning, other than the opportunity to put more and more heads into a machine. But even then, the integration, the cost of integrating those more and more heads would just probably have make the change in print head price not that important, right? So I think even with print heads that only cost less than $1,000, you get a much better performance. I'm thinking of like heads like the Epson head, for example. It's not that expensive, but
right.
You're getting more nozzles and better performance even from those.
Okay, Marco, any comment on that?
Yeah, I'd like to build on what Tim said. I would actually say, so the print heads are the sort of base, right? But the real evolution, I think, has come from the inkjet ink chemistry, right? Because as we go forward, we've had so much development in the chemistry. And the reason that's important is because that really becomes the parameter that allows you to print on a much broader range of substrates, which is absolutely key today because you never know what you can get, right? Because of the supply chain instabilities. Yeah. And these inks are inherently drying faster, which is raising the performance dramatically. So if the average throughput, back in the day, was maybe 30 square feet an hour at high quality mode. Today, that equivalently priced product is probably going to be 300 to even 1,000 square feet an hour. So the performance is not just in the heads; it's also a lot in the ink chemistry.
Yeah, that makes a huge difference. Obviously, some of those developments have led to movement into new areas. I know there's a growing presence of wide format inkjet within some manufacturing segments. One example would be printed fabrics for interior design or for clothing applications. Those come to mind. What other spaces are you seeing wide format inkjet gaining ground, and why is that? Is it just the right time, or did something become possible or feasible? Marco?
So a couple of things. First of all, as you mentioned in your opening remarks, the price competition has become a lot more severe. And so to differentiate, one really good way of doing that is to go up the value chain and get into things like fabrication. So during COVID, when there wasn't a lot of signage being ordered, right, because no stores were open, all of a sudden people who were still in the signage printing business said, well, you know what, I'll make a wrap to go around a hand sanitizer stand, or I'll make a window decor that's going to spiff up an office space for a fraction of the cost of having to blow out a wall or do something different. And so what we're really finding is that because it's so hard to find installers, many of the print shop owners themselves went out and actually got proficient at moving up that value chain, and they're able to charge for it. So it's complementary. Now, in terms of new applications relating to substrates, yes, of course, fabrics has been a huge breakthrough, and that will continue to evolve as time goes on. I think that the bigger issue for me is not so much the substrates or the applications, it's really the ability to personalize things. And so that's where a lot of the growth is. I mean, to me, because, okay, I'm a simple husband, right? But my wife's expenditures on custom wallpaper. And it's like, are you kidding me? Really? But that's what, is driving a lot of that demand. It's stuff that nobody else will have.
Right. And going back, the term personalization, obviously for direct mail, everybody gets it. It says, Dan, you've won $1 million, right? But for the wide format segment, how do we define personalization right now? And is that growing?
Oh, excellent question. So first of all, maybe I should have said versioning rather than personalization, right? Yep. So the wallpaper with the monkeys that, my wife so loves, it's not many people are going to order that, but there's enough of us, right, to do a certain very short run length. So that's one issue. But there is issues like relating to personalization. So, if you look at cars like Jeeps, right, they all have these personalized stickers now on them. And so it's a niche, it's a small market.
Sure.
But it is being enabled. You can personalize almost anything now, right? And so that's the consumers are getting more active, I guess. It's not just businesses anymore.
I see Marco's right. I mean, the other part of that is like, you just mentioned versioning, right? That's been a big thing in POP for a long time, right? Where, in right now hockey season, right? Up here you may have, the local beer store may have Boston Bruins, whereas in New York City you may have New York Rangers, highlighted among like the beer promotions in store signage and things like that. So the versioning certainly has been a key driver for digital wide format in POP for quite a while.
Yeah. And then Tim, just to follow up, that whole idea of the movement of wide format into manufacturing, whether for textiles, what other areas are you seeing it as having promise to grow?
Yeah. So another one I think is pretty interesting, Dan, is building products, right? Like we've recently been thinking a lot more about that, because certain of these industries, and I think building products is one of them. We look at some other things too, like footwear and fashion. They have in some cases, extremely inefficient supply chain, right? Think about it, that all of the product literally has to be made and produced and delivered to the store, and then people go up and pick from it, right?
Right. Yep.
And I think in the world in the future, we're going to see a lot more people just try to employ the Amazon model, where they don't make anything until the thing is already bought and paid for, right?
Sure. Right.
It's turned that model on its head, and so it's the same thing that's already happened in the book industry largely, right? So if you think about it like that, and I again, I know EFI is really into this. They're that whole idea of customized, whether it's tiles or wood products and things that they could make and print as once they're purchased, as opposed to let's just create a whole giant warehouse full of these things and hope people like what we design and buy.
Okay. Moving over to Marco, I know you follow numerous trends in the industry, including what's going on with industry consolidation. What are you seeing there? And what do you think is the primary motivation today for owners to sell? And then to stack on top of that, who's buying these days and why are they buying?
So talk about Pandora's box, right? So
Yeah.
half of success in life is really determined by just showing up and having the right time. And so if you're a print shop owner today, now might be the right time to sell for a number of reasons. First of all, the world of cash is much larger today than it was before COVID. So there's about 30% more cash in people's savings accounts now than there was before COVID. That cash is looking to find a home, right? And much of that is finding a home in private equity. So private equity is coming in and they're saying, boy, we've already conquered real estate. We've conquered all these other markets. Look at the print market. What a gold mine, because it is incredible in terms of cash flow. Right? If you don't pay your bill, you don't get the next run of signs or whatever. So it's very good in cash flow. And number two, it is very inefficient. And it's inefficient because for the last 2-3 decades, we've been competing upon service, right? Quick response time, personal connections, etc. And so private equity is coming in and they're saying, you know what? We're going to buy what they call a platform company. So that's a company between $10 to $15 million.
Okay.
And then we're going to add 8 other little guys underneath that. And then immediately we're getting rid of 8 accounting departments, 8 HR department, 8 procurement departments, you name it, and we're going to scale it up. And so now we have more volume, so we have a bit more leverage on purchasing power or raw materials. But more importantly, we can now also start to automate. Now, automation is key, right? Because the biggest problem, aside from not being able to get substrates today, is finding labor. And if you've got cash, you can invest in automation. And that is in a way that we frankly got badly wrong. We had expected that the wide format graphics market would take a long time to come back to 2019 levels, particularly at the higher volume segments where you're doing signage for sports stadiums and concerts and stuff, because we're not really going back there, right? But what we got wrong is that these private equity guys are saying, we don't care if it's not coming back yet. We need to automate now, and we're going to make that investment. And so that's what's driven a lot of that growth. Anyway, the short story, of course, to your question is, so why is now an interesting time to potentially sell? Well, we're running out of interesting wide format shops to buy from a private equity perspective. Okay. So if you've got a viable business, you don't have to have a perfect business, but it's got to have some unique hooks and angles and a good solid customer base. I don't care if you have old equipment, because guess what? I'm probably going to get rid of that anyway. What I really want is your book of business, and I want your skill, right? And those connections that you have. So the valuations are probably higher now on all of these businesses than we've seen in a long time.
Okay. Follow-up question on that. And then Tim, I'd love your opinion on this as well. But in terms of that drive to add automation, is the goal of automation to reduce labor, or is it to maximize let's say throughput or productivity, or is it both?
So the answer to this, it's probably both, right? But the stronger part of that is to reduce labor, because that is an issue that is not going to go away. You've probably heard me talk about the demographic issue, right? The baby, lack of babies, basically. We're not making enough of them and haven't for the last 2 decades. Those first babies born in 2008, right? There's going to be 15% fewer workers coming into the workforce. So we need to automate. That's really the key.
You and me are doing our part, Marco.
Yes.
Let's hear your comments on that, Tim.
Yeah, so I was, I basically echo what Marco just said about that. I mean, we see there's private equity is taking a role. That's having a huge role in consolidation. I mean, they say that, you guys know that we think a lot about like 80-90% of these wide format shops tend to be small shops, either between 1 and 10 employees, right? And it's an old trope, I guess, that people say like, oh, a business can survive a second generation, but seldom a third, right? And if it's a family business, you might have a hard time getting people, even within your own family, to really want to run something in the printing business, which people maybe believe is kind of old technology and not super exciting.
Yeah.
To that, I would say there's things in wide format that are exciting, right? So you could say like, hey, why not, help us set up a better e-commerce site, or help us get, introduce some automation and robotics or something that is technologically kind of exciting, and you should probably be thinking about that. But I mean, the big picture in terms of like when and why, that, there's ways you could certainly build some more continuity and excite your own, family and employees about being involved in the business.
Yeah.
But unquestioned, Marco's definitely right. There's a lot of cash out there, and so people are looking to either take advantage of that or maximize that, or buy cheap now because people are trying to get out from under a business that maybe doesn't seem super exciting from a growth perspective.
Okay, let's continue with excitement a little bit, Tim. I know in your time you spent with studying the wide format segment, what would you say is one of the most profound technological developments that's been along that path, has brought the most excitement, the most opportunity to the segment?
Well, we touched on it earlier. I mean, I was going to say, it's something I really believe there's a lot to do with the combination of printheads and inks, right? That has really been what has enabled, things to go from, it's the wide format kind of started out as CAD printers, right? And then you run a lot more water-based ink through them, and you're doing graphics, and then introduce more industrial heads, and then you're doing solvents, which enable billboard printing, and then you can do other kinds of inks, and then you're printing on fabrics and all. So like, you just think about that combination of ink and printhead technology, which has really enabled all of this, right? And as Marco talked about it, and I've already talked about some of the printed stuff, but every time you say like, is there what do we have to do to make it so we can print on this substrate, whether it's bricks or ceramic or plywood or wallpaper or super absorbent fabrics. There's just there's so many ways for this to go, that even to the point of can we run functional fluids through these and actually print electronics. There's just so many ways for this thing to go that it's exciting, and it's a historic sort of stayed exciting, right? And as guys who track this industry, Marco, probably we started out 20 something years ago, and we were tracking things like the old Durst photo printers and stuff like that, right? And electrostatic printers from those old Xerox companies and now look at where it's gone and where it is, and it's really still, I think there's still a lot of potential.
Yeah, I think for me personally, the introduction of UV curable ink into the wide format segment was game changing. It opened so many doors of opportunity. Marco, how about you?
So if I were to look out, right, the most impactful thing that I think we'll see going forward is not so much hardware innovation, but it's more software innovation. Because all of these hardware machines are very good. They're very reliable. They do exactly what you expect them to do. And so if you want to differentiate yourself, anybody can buy a certain brand wide format printer, but not everybody can deploy that the same exact way. And so the more you could figure out how to set up things like, as Tim mentioned, portals, web portals that allow your bigger customers, let's say Lowe's, to order their next round of POP signage depending on the region they're in, and they have some leeway, right, to personalize that based upon their geographic location without violating the corporate look and feel of things, that becomes immensely powerful. So, and in fact, it's what makes your customer base very sticky. The more you remove the pain of dealing with them, right? And it used to be, we used to love to hear from our sales rep, right? He'd take me out to lunch and we talk about new innovation. It was great, right?
Yeah.
We have no time. We're all overworked as a result of COVID. So if you want my business, just allow me to easily self-service myself. This is what I want. I want that kind of content, and I want this kind of price. So tell me exactly what it's going to cost online. I don't want to have to negotiate with you, and have lunch with you just to hear that you're only going to give me another 1% discount. No, just, tell me what it is. So automation isn't just equipment automation. It's also the interaction of the customer and the print provider itself.
Okay. Okay. So I know you both monitor multiple types of technologies as part of your work. And as a sort of opportunity generator for those using wide format, would you say wide format is more or less robust than the other technologies that you monitor as something to bring opportunity to businesses?
Boy, you can answer this question 1,000 different ways, right? So if I'm a general commercial printer,
Yeah.
I've always sort of looked at wide format graphics as not all that interesting because I can't scale it, right? But the reality is wide format is immensely profitable, right? If you take a typical offset base for a brochure, you get the equivalent of maybe 3 cents a sheet. You take that same equivalent sheet in wide format and you get about $1, right? And so frankly, all of a sudden the commercial print industry has been looking at this for years. And now that their overall offset volumes have come down so much, wide formats become a lot more interesting. So that's one piece, right? So we've got a lot more competition coming in.
Yeah.
Then you
Yeah.
say, well, what else can I do with wide format? Well, again, it depends on your definition. If you're talking UV flatbeds, the hot thing these days is getting into corrugated printing
Mhm.
for end caps in stores and the likes, and even subscription boxes. So there's lots of different things you can do, but I would say that the bigger concern I have is, again, you want to make it easier for customers to do business with you, for you to get a bigger share of wallet, if you will, right, by offering all of these services. And oh, by the way, if you don't have a certain kind of equipment, the easy answer is you wholesale that. So, the big thing right now, this time of year in the US, it's lawn signs, right? Every sixth grader gets, I graduated from middle school or whatever, elementary school, right? And
Absolutely.
so not everybody has the equipment to do that, but all of them will take your order and they'll wholesale it to a guy who will provide it for a fraction of the cost that you could print it at.
Mhm.
Everybody's happy. So, it's there's opportunity everywhere. You just got to know where to look.
Okay, Tim, where's the opportunity in your opinion?
So I think there's two things. If we just look at is it more robust than other things? Again, Marco just mentioned two things, right? One is the flexibility, right? Most of wide format is non-contact, so the ability to print onto any substrate or almost any substrate is fantastic, and so it gives you that opportunity to never have to say no, right? When someone says, can you get this, or can you do this, can you print this, the answer is most likely yes, right?
Sure,
Right. Especially if you're using certain ink technologies and certain equipment, the answer is almost always yes. And then there's sort of, I think there's two dimensions to scalability, right? One is, can I print all this fast enough to satisfy my customer? And please, and can I keep doing that, right? So that's I can just buy more printers and get more and add capacity and become more scalable. That's one way to think about it. Another way to think about it is like, what other kinds of services that are built on wide format can I add, right? So yeah, I do the printing, but can I charge for our creative services? Can those creative services be applied to companies' websites or logos and other kind of work? Can I do the installations? Into those installations, is that like an element of my service that we didn't do before that maybe now we have to we hire people and we do that, or maybe we don't, maybe we outsource it, right? But are those some things that's something I can do and something I can charge for? Is there other elements of like campaign management, whether it's measurement or fulfillment or things like that people that if you might think, oh, they're just a printer, but maybe they can have services like a digital marketing agency that are much more maybe attractive and add a lot of margin to company's bottom line. So I think scalability works kind of in two ways, and then being flexible enough to say, like, and opportunistic enough to say, is this something my customers are going to want in the future? Is this something I want to invest in? Something I want to hire for? Those are the key questions print shops have to ask themselves.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think the flexibility we've seen among some companies, and I think the willingness of companies who are able to redefine themselves and say, we were this, but we're something either incrementally or profoundly different moving forward, instead of just circling the wagons, being stuck where they are, is really beneficial. Tim, I'm just going to stick with you for this one. For many years, the focus in wide format was on more and more speed, and speed has surely arrived. Is there a maximum speed for the graphics segment? That's the first question. Then how does that change when you move into other markets? And this has already come up, but the idea of corrugated packaging, obviously the speed requirements there would be different or just as advantageous?
Yeah, for sure. So the short answer is, what, are we there yet, or is it fast enough yet? The answer is no, right? And it's not because, oh, we can't produce as quickly as all our customers want. The idea of speed is that it gives you the opportunity to increase your service levels, right? So if customers say, can I have that, the opportunity to cut lead times and say like, oh, my turnaround time it can be a differentiator, right? So that, I think that's one part of it. And then, that it doesn't matter what segment you're in. People are going to want to make, changes at the last minute. That speed enables you to be as flexible as possible and say like, that would be a problem, or, making last minute changes is a challenge to a current workflow. It's not. It becomes less so if you can, press a button and start printing 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 square feet in an hour. It becomes less so, right? And it enables you to be, a more flexible partner, a kind of partner that's easier to do business with. And I think that's, the desired state, right? Everybody wants to be that. It doesn't matter whether it's wide format or corrugated. You want to be, as easy to do business as you can.
Marco, your thoughts on this?
So speed, right? The faster you go, the lower your running cost is. So that's really what drives all of us, right? Because the lower the running cost, the more volume I can take on. But the one thing you have to remember is that, again, all of that comes at a cost, right? Particularly an upfront cost. So certainly, we could build a machine that's 10 times faster than any machine on the market today. But the cost of acquiring that machine is going to be in the millions of dollars. And so there's very few potential sites that could absorb that kind of capacity.
Right.
So that's why in our market today, you frankly have seen a huge fragmentation of all the various technologies. If you go back and look at history of like these Echo solvent printers, 12 years ago, there was maybe 4 or 5 models available. Today, we track over 60 discrete models. And so there's a speed and a width and a number of colors for basically any customer out there.
Right.
And that is also in a way a sign of market maturity, right? We filled in every little pigeonhole to meet everybody's need. So at the end of the day, yes, of course, everybody wants more speed, right? I want a faster car. But the reality is I also don't want to pay a lot more gas, right? So it's a balance. So yes, speed is important, but again, you have to weigh it against the investment cost and the ability to fill that machine.
Yeah, and let's contrast this a little bit with the corrugated. Obviously, is speed a different calculation there because you're dealing with a lot less diversity in substrates and a greater need for throughput, or am I mistaken there?
So I'm going to be a little controversial here. Okay. All of the specs, right, that we're coming up with for these corrugated presses say you have to have X number of boards per hour, right? It's got to be thousands of boards per hour. The reality is that the majority of the machines that are installed, and there's maybe about 100 now of these single pass, super fast machines, they're not running anywhere close to their maximum capacity utilization. And they're not running anywhere close to utilization because, frankly, the converters haven't figured out how to sell the output on these machines, right? Because you're not selling it on the basis of low cost, you're selling it on the basis of convenience, versioning, etc. And that's a whole different sales approach. So here's the interesting part. So all of us, are somewhat unhappy with the fact that we haven't gotten to the volumes that these machines are capable of getting to. But on the other hand, the value of that output is so high and the ability to charge commensurately for that is so good that even with a utilization of let's say 5 to 10% of what these presses are capable of, everybody's making their profit numbers.
Tim?
Well, I mean, I think generally speaking, when people talk about, whether you're converting analog to digital, the goal, the objective or the goal is to have digital printing speed that is on par with existing or resident technology, right? So, if you talk to somebody from like Procter and Gamble, they may say, we want to have no sacrifices. We don't want any sacrifice in terms of quality or cost or anything like that. We have they know more about packaging than almost anybody who's doing package printing. And they would say, like, this is how we do it. This is what it costs. We know everything about, changing elements and the psychology of these colors. We know everything, way more about it than any printing company ever will. So now tell us about the advantage of using variable data, or tell us about the advantage of versioning, or whatever. But we know more about it than most of you do.
Yeah.
So now if you say, okay, well, you get this value, unfortunately, you have to, you may have to build extra time in because this is a much slower process. Well, that's a sacrifice and they're not willing to make it. So the objective is speeds that are on par with resident technology.
Okay. And let's continue kind of on the concept of opportunities that people are accessing and looking at the next few years. And Tim, we'll just stick with you. What do you see as the growth market to watch for wide format, and why do you feel that way? And then conversely, what are the constraints on maybe the success of that market?
Sure. So we talked already about there's two that I think are pretty exciting. From a growth curve perspective, one of them is I'm still excited about fabric and fashion. I think there's largely because right now it has been as I said, tremendously inefficient supply chain, and there's an opportunity and I believe that this is true, that we're seeing some really exciting growth in that market based on some of the, I guess they're called tailwinds from the COVID crisis, right? Everyone stopped shopping at home. They're not going to the retail store, although I think last year we saw retail store openings actually outnumbered retail store closings. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of an exciting thing from the retail market, which is good news for wide format also. Yep. Nevertheless, I still think digitally printed fabric, whether it's for, the environmental graphics that Marco mentioned, or for short-term promotion, or for just because they're less costly and easier to ship around than, say, big rigid boards that are used often in trade shows. So we're excited about fashion and fabrics. And as I mentioned, I think we're just getting started on some of the other things like building products. So I think there's a lot of room in some exciting places to go. I don't know if it's going to be like, oh, your let's say your run-of-the-mill sign shop is going to be participating in those markets. But I do think from if we look at it, step back from my desk, those markets have pretty exciting growth curves.
Okay, and just a quick follow-up on that. I know, there's news all over the place about paper shortages and shortages of pressure-sensitive materials. Is there a shortage in the textile area? So
that you're exactly right, Dan. That's really the second part of the question was what's going to hold us back, right? And I was at an event last week, and I heard the statistic. I don't know if it's true, but I'm just going to repeat it anyway. They said 30% of the world's empty cargo containers are parked right now outside of Shanghai Harbor. This is as of in May of 2022, right? Mm-hmm. So there's the Chinese market is Chinese textile market is enormous, and that is a potentially this is a big hurdle, let's call it. The supply chain is something that without visibility into how that gets resolved in the near term, you have to say it's for sure it's a headwind. It's working against potential growth, and we certainly see it as we collect all these numbers worldwide. We're like, okay, people are telling us they want to buy, and but you talk to manufacturers, and unquestionably there's product shortages. They're not getting all the product that they could possibly sell, and that's a problem.
Okay, Marco, growth markets constraints.
So I'll build on Tim's comments a little bit. He's absolutely right. The supply constraints are hugely problematic coming out of the Far East. However, it's opened up an opportunity for onshoring. And so we're seeing a fairly large demand for onshored printed things like fabrics, particularly for apparel, not in North America or in Western Europe, but in Latin America and Mexico, because there's still labor available. It's within 24 hours of trucking of most US markets. So there is significant growth, and particularly in Europe, if you look at the higher value brands. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking not H&M, but they have a sub-brand called Arquette, premium clothing. That stuff is selling extremely well because of revenge spending, right? We haven't been spending money. I'm going to go out. I'm going to spend it. And so, yes, there's a lot of have-nots in the world as a result of COVID, but there's also a significant amount of haves. And these are the companies, or rather the consumers, that are spending the money on high quality, digitally printed clothing. And oh, by the way, you know what they love about digital? They love that, first of all, you could get prints that you couldn't get before. So if you go to Palm Beach, for example, for the next charity event, right? You don't want to look like your neighbor. So what happens is big brands like Lilly Pulitzer actually have a database where you can put in what dress you bought, and it's only available for this month, right? Because next month there'll be another pattern. Yeah. And that way you're assured you're never going to look like the next person who's showing up at the same event. And all of these things are digitally printed on dye sublimation. Now, okay, it's a small part of what they do, but it's hugely valuable. And that's the key. So instead of looking always at volume, I would urge you to look at where's the value. So
okay, wow, and I love the angle on that. I had never heard the term revenge spending before.
Me neither. I love that one, Marco.
Yeah, I'll have to go out and do some of that. So just a quick question for you both before we wrap it up. But Tim, is now a good time for people to be in wide format?
So I sure think it is. I mean, maybe it's because I drink the Kool-Aid or whatever, but I like this industry. Dan, you guys have all seen so many of these shop operators. People in this market are so creative. They do stuff with the equipment that probably most of the equipment manufacturers never would have thought of, right? That happens all the time. And as I said, from a macro perspective, we see, just anecdotally, like Marco and I live about 2 or 3 towns away. The other day I was at there's a new Market Basket in Hanover, like a couple towns away from me. This is on Saturday. It's just a grocery store, but it was packed. And part of the people want a different kind of retail experience. Market Baskets are expanding in our area. So anyway, I think people want a different kind of retail experience. I think wide format graphics help provide a lot of that with, whether it's, Marco mentioned window graphics and floor signs and hanging banners and directional signage and all the different stuff that you just see when you just walk around a grocery store. Yeah. So retail is still growing. We mentioned fabrics and building products and corrugated, and there's all these markets where there's opportunities out there. There's a lot of them, and that didn't even go into some of the services and installation and whether it's creative and other kinds of data-driven services. There's all kinds of stuff that people could be doing that are either, yes, it's wide format, or it's just right next to wide format, whether it's DTG printing and opportunities like that. So I think it's a great time to be in this market.
Marco?
So the wistful part of me says, man, I wish I would have opened up a wide format print shop 20 years ago, because I'd be retired by now. Those were truly the glory days. It's still a great business to be in because, like Tim said, this is what we love, right? It's our passion. It's not just making a living. It's sort of, it's our life. And so it's a good time to be in this business. And the other side of the coin is, well, it's a lot harder today to run a print business, right? Because especially with the lack of substrates and the labor problems and everything. At the same time, there is still innovation. And so all of the examples Tim just mentioned, they didn't exist 10 years ago. So there is certainly room for growth and opportunity. And during our, lifetimes, you can't substitute what we see around us, right? There was talk about electronic signage taking over all the point of purchase signage. It hasn't happened. And for reasons we won't go into now, it's not going to happen in mass, right? So print is going to remain extremely important to everything that we see and touch in our daily lives. And so when you start, looking at it that way, it's not just a piece of paper, it's everything that surrounds us. My God, it's going to be a good industry for decades to come.
Well, on that note, Marco Boer of IT Strategies and Tim Greene of IDC, thank you so much to both of you for joining me today.
It's great to be with you guys.
Yep, and I look forward to seeing you both at the Wide Format Summit. And
Us too.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Dan.
You're welcome. Back to you, Ashley.
Thank you so much to Steve and Denise, as well as Dan, Marco, and Tim for joining us today. And thank you to all of you, our listeners. Stay tuned for the next episode of Impressions Xchange podcast.